Dr. J's Pet Tips.
Hello, hello, everybody. So it is finally summer, and as folks have said, we are outside, and people are definitely being outside, and that includes our four-legged friends and two-legged friends. There's a lot of things that people don't always necessarily think about when it's hot outside, but we're going to go down a couple of things. The first one is that a lot of people are traveling, and with that, pets are either traveling with them or they're going to boarding facilities. So the boarding facilities are filling up this summer. The biggest thing to do would be number one, making sure your pet is up to date on all vaccinations. Rabies, distemper if you have a dog, um, uh, FELV or feline distemper if you have a cat. For dogs, you want to do your kennel cough vaccine. You want to possibly do canine influenza, particularly if they're being boarded, because you have a whole bunch of pets in a new area, and they can catch some things. If you are traveling with your pet, then you're going to want to follow the guidelines of wherever you're going. If you're doing international travel, then your pet most likely is going to need an international travel certificate. And depending on where you're going, have requirements for vaccines, for deworming, and also sometimes for testing. So you want to make sure way in advance that you have met all those requirements so that you can safely travel with your pet and also return back into the country. So that's the biggest thing that you want to do. But if you are hanging around at home with your pet, there's a lot of fun things that you can do. You want to definitely make sure that in the heat of the summer, your pet is staying cool and hydrated. One thing that you don't want to do is shave their fur. Their fur acts as insulation and it helps them regulate their temperature. So shaving their fur for the summer
Oh
actually
man.
makes it harder for them.
Mm.
Now that you mention it, I mean, my dogs, like, I take them to the dog park. I take them to the dog park like every day. Well, almost every day. I can't say every day, but I take them to the dog park regularly. And they used to be running around, going crazy, and playing with the other dogs. And now it's just like they don't want to run. They don't want, it gets hot so quick. And I mean, they just
Mhm.
stay around the water fountain.
Yeah. So you definitely want to know, that if it is hot outside to you, it is hot out there to them. Another thing, particularly for their little pads, they're very sensitive. Those
Yeah.
pads are extremely sensitive. It's how they regulate their temperature. It's how they tell their temperature often. So one rule of thumb is to put it on the pavement. If you can't keep your hand there for longer than a minute, your pet does not need to be on that pavement. That can burn their little paws,
And,
and that's really.
I had all the way to the dog park is asphalt. So I actually stopped walking them because it was just so hot.
Mhm.
So I just drive them there and then let them run around the dog park there.
Mhm.
So
It's really important. Like short walks, if you have like a lot of grassy area, then you can get away with a little bit more because the grass is cooler, but you want to really limit that time. And then the last big part is recognizing signs of heat exhaustion, panting heavily, trying, not as active in the activity. Um, heat exhaustion can be deadly for pets. So you don't want to leave them outside for long periods of time. If you have those short what we call brachiocephalic dogs, so those little pugs, those little short nosed Frenchies, and all, they cannot tolerate this heat. Being outside for even 10 minutes can be too long and deadly for them. So
really,
keeping them inside and cool, taking your walks early in the morning and then late at night when it's cooler will be much easier for them. The downside of that is also that's when mosquitoes are most active, so you want to make sure they're up to date with their heartworm prevention. But those are kind of the tips for keeping your pet safe in the summer.
awesome. So in pre-show you mentioned something about dogs and putting their heads out the
Yes.
window. So
so
my dogs do that all the time. What's the problem with that?
like our little dog on our graphic, he had on his little doggles and all, which kind of compensates for sticking his head out the window. But cars kick up dirt, rocks, things like that. You think about what your windshield can go through and how you get cracks, and those things can pop up in the dog's face and in their eyes.
Yeah.
So you
I hadn't even
definitely
thought
want to
about
be
that.
yeah, you definitely want to be careful with their head out the window or with them in the back of a pickup truck loose because they can jump out. Sudden stops can throw the pet out of the car or out of the back
Yeah.
of the pickup truck. So, I definitely kind of cringe when I see the dogs out the window. I'm like, oh, put your head back in, put your head back in. Just
Oh.
because we don't want to see, eye damage. We don't want to know things popping up, cutting them in the face, things.
I'm curious, have you seen, like, in the emergency room, have you seen that? Where dogs have been hit in the face and or
Yeah, you definitely can see that. I mean, do I see it a lot? I mean, it's not necessarily the top thing, but I
okay.
have seen it, and definitely considering like what my windshield goes through on the Beltway,
Mm,
I definitely do not want my little ones. And luckily, I have tiny ones, so they really can't even get their heads out the window. Um, so, they can't do that, but it definitely is a risk. And dogs have been doing it, but when that happens to your dog, you don't care anymore.
yeah.
So, and also definitely if they're in the car or in the back of the truck, having them properly secured. I have seen, dogs coming in after being in accidents and having injuries, they're being thrown around the car or something, or thrown out of the car. So you want them properly secured.
So I have a
So
question for that.
I
Go
also
ahead,
have a
Rob.
question.
Go
Just
ahead.
as we're talking about heat, I know that year over year, it just seems to be a failed message as far as, don't keep your animals in a hot car. Now, as a veterinarian, is that something that you have to deal with fairly regularly? Is there messaging that you and your peers try to get out year over year, and what can they do better?
I mean, definitely, we talk about if it's too hot for you, it's too hot for them. And the inside of a car reaches, even in the shade, can reach over 100 degrees rather quickly. And so heat exhaustion is definitely something that we seriously see. It's when we start hitting those dog days of summer around the thing, we start saying, okay, we got to be ready for those, cooling activities because these dogs are going to come in crisis, and cats too. They can come in crisis, and it's really hard to deal with a grieving family and have them lose their pet for something that really could have been so easily prevented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about securing your pets previously.
Mhm.
So what's the proper way to secure your pet? Because I have a I purchased a I don't know, it's like a strap that you connect to their collar. But that
Mhm.
feels like that's, even though that's secure from keeping them from moving around, but if I were in an accident, it feels like it could snap their neck. I mean,
So a lot of times you may want to, like, instead of attaching it to like a collar, you want to use a harness instead
harness.
so that you have the distribution of the weight. So it's not in that pinpoint area, it's more of the whole chest. But definitely like the doggy seat belts, which, kind of like the strap clicks. If the animal is small enough, or if your car is big enough, a proper cage, or carry a doggy or pet carrier would be the things that are most safe. And also too, because they don't mean to, but they can get in the way for you jumping from the front to the back
That's
and
true.
trying to get in
Mhm.
your lap, and
Hmm.
or trying to see some other dog and trying to get out the window at that
Hmm.
one. So
Yeah.
keeping them safe is really going to be much better for everybody, including you.
Okay.
Absolutely. I remember having two big dogs and driving my Jeep. And, a couple of times I've had to brake harder than others, or if I'm just doing a little bit of off roading and all of a sudden I've got a curious, affectionate 80-pound animal that's from the back seat into my console in half a second and kind of going, oh, damn, get out
Yeah.
of the way, dog.
Hmm.
I got to drive.
Mhm.
I got to
Yeah.
drive.
Yeah, and then also, I guess one other pet tip is definitely making sure your pet has their collars and tags with identification. There's also a thing called a microchip, what we call the internal tag. It's a little tiny chip that is injected in most vets and animal control and shelters have a scanner, and the number will come up, and they can contact the company to get you reunited with your pet. So that's another big tip.
So, Rob,
Awesome.
I have a story too because it's an older story. I had a but actually you remember Ebony,
Hmm.
Dr. J. So she because Dr. J used to take care of Ebony, but sh it was when she was a puppy and she was little, and so she was riding in the back. Oh no, actually she was riding in the front seat, and of course I didn't have any harness, and they really didn't talk about doing harnesses. This was years ago, um, and stuff like that. And so I had her sit in the front seat, and then somehow she pressed the button, and the window came all the way down. And it was right in the time when I was going into a turn, and she tumbled out the window.
Oh
Oh,
no!
snap.
Yeah, I was like devastated. I was like, I just stopped in the middle of the street. I was like, I thought I was the worst dog parent ever. It was like I was like, I was messed up. I was like, I mean, surprisingly, she seemed to be okay. Because I guess she was a puppy, so she probably didn't know what was going on and stuff.
I caught her on the first bounce.
Right.
Pretty much.
But that's a
They
good
are.
example of what you're talking about. I mean,
Yeah.
it was scary, I gotta admit. I thought she might have been dead, I just didn't know it. I was like, I was done.
Yeah, I mean, definitely with if it had been really a lot of traffic, the other cars wouldn't have
Coulda
been
run
able to stop.
over.
Definitely, yeah. Especially working ER, I see it all. And so I definitely want to keep them safe.
Kept that story to myself. I didn't tell you that story back in the day 'cause I felt so bad. Alright, well, thanks for the bad tips.